Welcome to Quiz Time. I'm your quiz master, Sean, and I've got lots and lots of questions for you. From the 1950s through the 1970s, trivia. So let's see what we remember about all three of those decades, shall we? And have a little fun while doing it. Let's begin. What historic weather event struck South America in 1965, causing widespread flooding? Was it the Amazonian deluge, La Niña, or the Great El Niño? It was the Great El Niño. Which Canadian inventor is credited with creating the first practical snowmobile in the 1950s? Alexander Graham Bell, Joseph Armand Bombardier, or Elijah McCoy? It was Joseph Armand Bombardier. What major discovery was made in Mexico in the 1950s, shedding light on Mayan history? The Palenque inscriptions, the Tenochtitlan ruins, or Olmec heads? It was the Palenque inscriptions. Which American innovation became central to the space race of the 1960s? The Apollo missions, Sputnik, or the Hubble telescope? It was the Apollo missions. What South American country launched its first satellite, the SAC-B, in the late 1960s? Was it Brazil, Argentina, or Chile? And it was Argentina. What Venezuelan leader nationalized the oil industry in the 1970s? Hugo Chavez, Romulo Betancourt, or Carlos Andrés Perez? It was Carlos Andrés Perez. What major Northern American country passed Medicare legislation in the 1960s, providing universal health care? The United States, Canada, or Mexico? It was Canada. What political party dominated Mexican politics through the 1950s through 1970s? Was it PAN, PRI, or Morena? That Mexican political party was the PRI. In what year did Canada officially adopt its current national flag, featuring the red maple leaf? Was it 1965, 1957, or was it 1971? It was 1965. What South American revolutionary figure is closely associated with Bolivia, where he was killed in 1967? And that would be Che Guevara. What U.S. president resigned in 1974 due to the Watergate scandal? And that president was Richard Nixon. Which Southern American sport derived from ancient indigenous traditions was revitalized in the mid-20th century? Pelota Purepecha, Polo, or Hialai? It is Hialai. What major Canadian team won the Stanley Cup 5 times in the 1950s? Was it the Montreal Canadiens, the Vancouver Canucks, or was it the Toronto Maple Leafs? It was the Montreal Canadiens. What Olympic Games event, held in Mexico City in 1968, saw athletes make a historic Black Power salute during the medal ceremony? Was it the marathon, the long jump, or the 200-meter sprint? It was a 200-meter sprint. Which South American country won its first FIFA World Cup in 1958? Was it Argentina, Brazil, or Uruguay? And that South American country was Brazil. What 1950s Mexican song became a global hit and is often associated with mariachi music? La Bamba, Guadalajara, or Cielito Lindo? It was La Bamba. What major music festival held in 1969 in the U.S. became an iconic symbol of the counterculture movement? Was it Woodstock? Was it the Monterey Pop Festival? Or was it Altamont? It was Woodstock. What popular Mexican-American rock band formed in the late 1960s? El Tri, Los Lobos, or Santana? And as we like to say in U.S., Santana. Which Canadian singer became a folk icon in the 1960s with hits like Both Sides Now? And that Canadian singer is Johnny Mitchell. What South American dance gained popularity worldwide in the 1950s? Salsa, tango, or samba? And that South American dance is tango. What famous Mexican-American musician gained fame with hits like La Bamba before his tragic death? Richie Valens, Carlos Santana, or Tito Puente? It was Richie Valens who sang La Bamba. Which genre, heavily influenced by African American culture, rose to prominence in the United States during the 1960s? And that would be soul. Which indigenous civilization's ruins became a popular tourist site in Mexico during the 1960s? Maya, Aztec, or Olmec? And that would be Mayan. Which Mexican holiday saw a revival in cultural importance during the 1970s? Was it Mexican Independence Day, Dia de los Muertos, or Cinco de Mayo? And that is Dia de los Muertes. What landmark event did Canada host in 1967, showcasing global culture and innovation? The Vancouver World Fair, the Calgary Stampede, or the Montreal Expo 67? It was the Montreal Expo 67. Who became the first female president in Latin America in 1974? The first female Latin American president, Isabel Perón. What was the name of the trade agreement between Mexico and the United States signed in the 1970s? Was it NAFTA? Was it the Pan American Pact? Or was it the Maquiladora program? It was the Maquiladora program. In which year did Fidel Castro's Cuban Revolution succeed? 1959, 1956, or was it 1962? And that year was 1959. What major civil rights legislation was passed in the United States in 1964? Was it the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, or was it the Civil Rights Act? It was the Civil Rights Act. Which South American country experienced a coup in 1973 that led to the rise of Augusto Pinochet? And that country was Chile. Which Japanese film director gained international fame in the 1950s? Hayao Miyazaki, Akira Kurosawa, or Ozu Yasujiro? And that was Akira Kurosawa. What Turkish architectural site became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1979? Was it the Topkapi Palace, Hagia Sophia, or Cappadocia? It was Hagia Sophia. What treaty led to the creation of the European Economic Community in 1957? The Treaty of Paris, the Maastricht Treaty, or was it the Treaty of Rome? It was the Treaty of Rome. Who was the French president that founded the Fifth Republic in 1958? François Mitterrand, Charles de Gaulle, or Georges Pompidou? It was Charles de Gaulle. What major event divided Germany into East and West during the Cold War? The Potsdam Conference, the Berlin Wall construction, or NATO's formation? It was the Berlin Wall construction. Which European country experienced a military coup in 1967? Was it Greece? Was it Spain? Or was it Portugal? And it was Greece. What year did the UK join the European Economic Community? 1973, 1975, or 1970? When the UK joined the EEC, that would be 1973. What revolutionary uprising occurred in Hungary in 1956? Was it the Prague Spring, the Velvet Revolution, or the Hungarian Revolution? And it was the Hungarian Revolution. Which Soviet leader initiated de-Stalinization in the 1950s? Was it Mikhail Gorbachev, Leonid Brezhnev, or Nikita Khrushchev? And that Soviet leader was Nikita Khrushchev. What 1968 movement in Czechoslovakia sought political liberalization? Was it the Prague Spring, the Velvet Revolution, or the Hungarian Reform? It was Prague Spring. What international agreement established the European Free Trade Association in 1960? Was it the Stockholm Convention, the Geneva Agreement, or the Paris Protocol? It was the Stockholm Convention. Which Soviet satellite country became the first to launch a human into space? Soviet satellite country. And that country was the Soviet Union. What war broke out in 1950, dividing a country into North and South? The Vietnam War, the Korean War, or the Indochina War? It was the Korean War. Which Indian Prime Minister declared a state of emergency in 1975? And that Indian Prime Minister was Indira Gandhi. What Asian country gained independence from the UK in 1957? Was it Singapore, Malaysia, or Brunei? And gaining independence from the UK in 1957 was Malaysia. Which movement in China led to the destruction of cultural heritage in the 1960s? And that movement in China is called the Cultural Revolution. What year did the Vietnam War officially end? 1970, 1975, or 1973? And it was 1973. What was the name of Japan's post-war economic miracle? The Rising Sun era, the Japanese miracle, or the Bubble era? Japan's post-war economic miracle is the Japanese miracle. What Asian country suffered from a devastating cyclone in 1970, killing over 500,000 people? India, Myanmar, or East Pakistan, now Bangladesh? It was East Pakistan, Bangladesh. Which Southeast Asian country declared independence in 1949, marking the end of Dutch colonial rule? Which Southeastern country was ruled by the Dutch? Indonesia. What international sporting event was held in Tokyo in 1964? Was it the Winter Olympics, the Summer Olympics, or was it the Asian Games? They hosted the Summer Olympics in 1964. What landmark agreement normalized relations between China and the United States in 1972? Was it the Sino-American Pact, the Beijing Accord, or the Shanghai Communique? It was the Shanghai Communique. What 1956 crisis involved the Soviet Union suppressing an uprising in Hungary? Was it the Hungarian Uprising, the Prague Suppression, or was it called the Berlin Crisis? It was the Hungarian Uprising. What was the name of the Soviet space station program that began in 1971? The name of the Soviet space station program starting in 71 was Salyut. What Eurasian country became a hub for the Silk Road revival in the 1950s? Was it Turkey, Uzbekistan, or was it Kazakhstan? And a hub for the Silk Road revival? Turkey. Which Soviet cosmonaut was the first human to orbit Earth in 1961? Was it Alexei Leonov? Was it Yuri Gagarin? Or was it Valentina Tereshkova? It was Yuri Gagarin. What pipeline project connected Eurasian oil reserves to Europe in the 1970s? Was it the Caspian Connector, the Trans-Eurasian Pipeline, or the Siberian Pipeline? It was the Siberian Pipeline. What country saw the 1979 Soviet invasion, marking a critical point in Eurasian politics? Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Iran? It was Afghanistan. Which European and Asian border country joined NATO in 1952? European and Asian border country? And that was Turkey. What country emerged as a key regional power after the Iranian oil nationalization in 1951? Saudi Arabia, Iraq, or was it Iran? The key regional power that emerged was Iran. Which Soviet satellite launched in 1957 started the space race? Was it Sputnik? Was it Luna 1? Or was it Soyuz? And in 1957, it was Sputnik. Which Eurasian empire officially dissolved after World War II? The British Raj, the Soviet Empire, or was it the Ottoman Empire? The British Raj officially dissolved after World War II. What iconic music festival symbolized the counterculture movement in the UK in the 1970s? Was it the Isle of Wight Festival, the Glastonbury Festival, or was it the Reading Festival? It was the Glastonbury Festival. What Eurasian region became a cultural symbol of independence with its ballet during the Cold War? Was it Ukraine, Siberia, or was it Georgia? And the Eurasian region was Georgia. What Asian practice became popular in Europe during the 1970s? Asian practice popular in Europe. That is yoga. What famous Russian novel was smuggled to the West in 1957 and later banned in the USSR? Dr. Zhivago, Crime and Punishment, or was it War and Peace? It was Dr. Zhivago. What major infrastructure project was completed in Sydney in 1959? The Sydney Opera House, the Westgate Bridge, or was it Snowy Mountains Hydroelectric Scheme? It was Snowy Mountains Hydroelectric Scheme. Who was the Australian Prime Minister during the Vietnam War involvement in the 1960s? Was it Gough Whitlam, Robert Menzies, or Harold Holt, who was the Australian Prime Minister during the Vietnam War? It was Harold Holt. Which Australian city hosted the Commonwealth Games in 1962? The Commonwealth Games in 62 were hosted by Perth. What 1967 referendum in Australia is considered a turning point for Aboriginal rights? Is it the Land Rights Act, the referendum to include Indigenous people in census, or was the Native Title Act? It was a referendum to include Indigenous people in the census. Which Australian city became a cultural hub with the opening of its iconic opera house in 1973? Brisbane, Melbourne, or was it Sydney? It was Sydney. What deadly cyclone struck northern Australia in 1974, leading to mass evacuations? And that deadly cyclone was Cyclone Tracy. What event led to the disappearance of Prime Minister Harold Holt in 1967? Was it a boating accident, a swimming accident, or was it a plane crash? It was a swimming accident. What resource boom significantly boosted the Australian economy in the 1960s? Was it gold mining, iron ore mining, or was it coal exports? It was iron ore mining. Which Australian Indigenous land rights activist gained prominence during the 1960s? And that was Charles Perkins. Which policy ended in Australia in 1973, marking a shift toward multiculturalism? The White Australia Policy, the Native Title Policy, or the Immigration Reform Act? It was the White Australia Policy. What Pacific Island country gained independence from New Zealand in 1962? Was it Fiji, Tonga, or Samoa? And that island country was Samoa. Which Micronesian nation became a UN trust territory under U.S. administration in 1947? And that would be the Marshall Islands. Which Pacific island held nuclear tests conducted by France in the 1960s? Was it Bora Bora, Tahiti, or the Mururoa Atoll? The French held nuclear tests at Mururoa Atoll. What Pacific nation gained full independence from the UK in 1970? Was it Fiji, was it Tonga, or was it Kiribati? And it was Fiji gaining independence from the UK in 1970. What environmental damage was caused by U.S. nuclear testing in the Pacific during the 1950s? Radioactive contamination, marine overfishing, or was it coral reef destruction? It was radioactive contamination. Which Polynesian nation established diplomatic relations with China in the 1970s? And that would be Tonga. What was the name of the first Pacific nation to send a delegate to the United Nations? Was it Samoa? Was it Papua New Guinea? Or was it Fiji? And that was Papua New Guinea. What Pacific Island group saw significant environmental degradation due to phosphate mining? Was it Tuvalu, Kiribati, or Nauru? And that would be Nauru. Which island nation became a Commonwealth member in 1978? Was it Vanuatu? Was it Palau? Or was it the Solomon Islands? Was the Solomon Islands. What Pacific island chain was heavily impacted by Japanese occupation during World War II, influencing its post-war policies? And that would be the Marshall Islands. Which Himalayan kingdom opened its borders to tourism for the first time in 1974? Was it Nepal, Bhutan, or Sikkim? It was Bhutan. What small African island nation gained independence from Portugal in 1975? Was it Seychelles, Sao Tome and Principe, or Comoros? It was Sao Tome and Principe. What Caribbean nation experienced a U.S. invasion in 1965 due to political instability? In 1965, who did the U.S. invade in the Caribbean? It was the Dominican Republic. What Southeast Asian nation transitioned from British colonial rule to independence in 1963? Was it Brunei, Singapore, or was it Malaysia? It was Malaysia. Which Middle Eastern nation transformed from a kingdom into a republic in 1962? Was it Oman, Yemen, or was it Kuwait that went from a kingdom to a republic? It was Yemen. Which African island nation was declared a Portuguese overseas province in 1951? Seychelles, Madagascar, or Cape Verde? It was Cape Verde. Which Central Asian republic experienced significant Soviet-led industrialization during the 1960s? Was it Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, or was it Kyrgyzstan? It was Kazakhstan. What Caribbean island declared independence from the UK in 1966? Was it Jamaica, Barbados, or was it Trinidad? It was Barbados. What South American territory became a British overseas territory in 1962? And that would be British Guyana. Which Mediterranean island became independent from the UK in 1964? Was it Cyprus, Malta, or was it Crete? It was Malta. What Southeast Asian sultanate became fully self-governing in 1971? Was it Singapore, was it Timor-Leste, or was it Brunei? It was Timor-Leste. Which Central Pacific Island group is known for its heavy WW2 legacy and gained self-governance in 1965? Was it Palau, the Cook Islands, or the Northern Mariana Islands? It was the Northern Mariana Islands. Which Indian Ocean island achieved independence from the UK in 1968? Was it Seychelles, Maldives, or Mauritius? And that Indian Ocean island is Mauritius. And now question 100. What island nation near Madagascar declared independence from France in 1975? Island nation near Madagascar. That would be Comoros. They gained independence from France. Thanks for playing Quiz Time. Drop your score in the comments, please, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on Quiz Time when it comes out. And we make Quiz Time a lot because it's fun, and we like playing it with you. Thanks for playing. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.